I thought we were going to record today. So, every 4 years, I feel like something like this happens.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think that there's a real need to be careful on the part of disciples of Christ, right? Because I think that there's a temptation to put our hope in the powers of men, right? And Scripture warns us about that, right? The Psalms tell us to not put our trust in princes or the sons of men, but put our trust in the Lord. And I think that there's just more than ever, I think there's a real temptation for us, especially in this country, but definitely we see it in the world, I think, to put our trust and our hope for our fulfillment and our happiness in a political party, in a political agenda, in a political figure. And I just think that it's not where we're always going to be let down. We're always going to be let down no matter who they are, no matter what they're proposing. And I think throughout history, if we study history, we just see that political regimes never can give us the human fulfillment that all of us long for so much.
Sure.
Really deep down.
Yeah, and I feel like part of that longing, especially in like the context of wider societal life and public life, and we long for justice, right? Like that's something that all of us just kind of know within us is something we long for. We desire. We desire each person to be given what is due to them, right? And we desire it for ourselves too, which is a very real thing and a good thing. And so that's always like on our minds as we think about legislation and politicians and presidential elections and all that kind of stuff. And I like to think about, as this is from Pope Benedict XVI, he talks about how that desire for justice is one of the most convincing ways for him that eternity with God is real, and that's what we're made for, because that's the only place that we're going to find this perfect fulfillment of this longing for justice, which is true and good that we actually have it, but we need to look in the right place for that fulfillment, which is what you were talking about, the hope and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting because it seems that there's certain goods, right, that all of us, as you pointed out rightly, all of us desire certain goods. And there's levels of goods that we desire, right? Like everybody desires food, right? And food is a necessary thing, and the attainment of food is possible, right? Like the fact that we get hungry, that the way that we get hungry demonstrates to us that food exists. It wouldn't, like, the desire for food wouldn't exist in us biologically if there wasn't a way for that to be satiated, if there wasn't a way for that to be fulfilled. And so I think that just speaks to your point about what Pope Benedict would say, right? In that when we desire for authentic justice, when we desire mercy, and somehow we know, right, Christ makes it very clear to us that mercy and justice are not opposed, but actually our mercy is a fulfillment of justice, that mercy always includes justice. And that's a mysterious thing to us, and it only seems really, really possible in God.
Yeah, and thinking about this desire for justice and this desire for mercy, the only one who is truly and entirely merciful and just is God himself. So when we think about that desire, we're ultimately desiring the person of Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
That's who we're longing for. And so one of the quotes from Scripture which kind of circulates in my head and in my heart with some regularity, but more so recently, especially within the context of what's going on in our society and everything like that. And St. Paul talks in the letter to the Philippians, I think it's in chapter 3, maybe it's in chapter 4, at the beginning of chapter 4, he says, like, our citizenship is in heaven.
Right.
And I think that it's crucial to really remember that. To not expect from people and circumstances on earth what those people and those circumstances cannot give, right? So our expectation should be for justice and mercy from God, and that takes place for us in heaven itself, and we're actually citizens of heaven because we've been baptized.
Right.
So we need to live with that forward thinking. That's where that hope comes in. to really look towards heaven as the fulfillment of that, and not towards something here which really can't give it. And so if we expect it from here, and then those expectations aren't met, we're kind of left unsatisfied. And that points to the fact that satisfaction really comes from heaven.
Right, yeah, and that again, I mentioned history earlier, but I think it's important to recognize that throughout all of history, every single political body has not been able to give man his transcendent meaning, right? Has not been able to give him a meaning that's in reference to God. And political regimes that try always end up becoming totalitarian, right? And political regimes that try to give man his deepest meaning that always is going to turn into the gulag, right?
Sure.
That turns into the French Revolution, or it turns into the USSR. Is no way to get around it. So I think just being reminded as we need to be constantly that we are citizens of heaven, I think could never be. It can't be said enough.
Sure.
Around this time of year.
Yeah, so maybe to kind of close this off is just to think about our hope really not being fulfilled here, but being fulfilled in heaven. And so within the context of everything that's been going on in our country and what's taking place currently right now with the election and everything, just remember that as Catholics, as Christians, that our citizenship is in heaven, and that's where our hope needs to be directed.